Believers who never fully fit in often carry a deeper assignment, not because they're defective, not because they failed to adapt or learn the unspoken rules of belonging, but because God marked them for something that requires a different kind of formation, the kind that only happens in the margins, the kind that only makes sense when you stop trying to force yourself into spaces that were never meant to hold you. You've felt it for years. That quiet dissonance in rooms full of people who seem to speak a language you can't quite master. You laugh when they laugh, but the humor doesn't land the same way. You participate, but there's a glass wall between you and the ease everyone else seems to carry. You're present but never fully seen, included but never truly known, and the worst part isn't the loneliness, it's the shame, the persistent whisper that tells you something is wrong with you. That if you were just more engaging, more flexible, more like them, you'd finally belong. So you've tried. You've adjusted your tone, softened your convictions, hidden the parts of you that seem too intense or too much, and still the distance remains. This isn't failure, this is assignment. Throughout Scripture, God consistently chose people who didn't fit, not because they were broken, but because their calling required them to stand outside the systems everyone else trusted. They couldn't be shaped by the same forces that shaped the majority, because they were being prepared to challenge, reform, or rebuild what the majority had accepted. Moses grew up in Pharaoh's palace, but was never Egyptian. He fled to the wilderness, spent 40 years as a shepherd, and even when God called him back, he stood apart. He couldn't speak to Pharaoh as an insider because his authority didn't come from Pharaoh's world. It came from a burning bush in the desert, from a place of absolute otherness. He didn't fit in Egypt. He didn't fit among his own people, who resented his leadership. He didn't even fit comfortably in his own calling, constantly pushing back against God's instructions. But that persistent sense of not belonging was what made him effective. He carried the weight of being between worlds, and that tension became the birthplace of deliverance. Jeremiah was called before he was born, set apart for a word no one wanted to hear. He wasn't invited to the gatherings of the comfortable. He wasn't welcomed at the tables of power. He wept alone. He prophesied to people who mocked him. He spent years speaking truth into a void that refused to listen. And God told him clearly, "Do not pray for this people. Do not intercede. You are not here to blend in with their hopes. You are here to stand against them." That assignment required isolation. It required the refusal of belonging, because Jeremiah's effectiveness depended entirely on his willingness to be misunderstood, rejected, and alone. If he had fit in, he would have compromised. If he had been accepted, he would have softened the message to keep the peace. His not belonging wasn't a deficiency, it was a prerequisite. You are not like Jeremiah because you enjoy being an outsider. You're like him because you can't stop seeing what others refuse to acknowledge. You notice the compromise everyone else calls wisdom. You feel the emptiness behind the noise everyone else calls worship. You recognize the performance everyone else calls authenticity. And because you see it, you can't participate in it without betraying something essential in yourself. This is why you don't fit, not because you're judgmental, but because you're awake. And wakefulness in a sleeping room is always isolating. Paul understood this completely. Before Christ, he fit perfectly. He had the right credentials, the right education, the right lineage. He belonged to the systems of power, and spent his energy defending them violently. But the moment Jesus confronted him, everything that once gave him belonging became worthless. He called it garbage, refuse, loss, and from that moment forward, he never fit again. Not with the Jews who saw him as a traitor, not with the Gentiles who questioned his authority, not even fully with the other apostles, who sometimes doubted his legitimacy. He was perpetually between worlds, carrying a message that both sides resisted, and he said it plainly: if I were still trying to please people, I would not be a servant of Christ. His not belonging wasn't a wound to heal, it was the evidence of his calling. The price of carrying truth is the loss of easy belonging. And Paul paid it willingly, over and over, because he understood that some assignments require you to live outside the comfort of consensus. If you have spent your life not fitting in, it's possible you've been carrying an assignment you didn't ask for but cannot escape. You are never meant to blend into the patterns everyone else follows, because your calling is to reveal what those patterns obscure. You were never meant to find your place in the systems everyone else trusts, because your work is to build something those systems cannot contain. This doesn't mean you're better than anyone. It means you're different. And that difference has a purpose. The believers who fit in easily often carry assignments that require community, collaboration, and the ability to work within existing structures. They build teams, they create movements, they mobilize the crowd. And those assignments are essential, powerful, and needed. But your assignment isn't that. Yours requires the ability to stand alone, to hear clearly when everyone else is shouting, to wait when everyone else is rushing, to hold steady when everyone else is compromising. And that kind of assignment cannot be carried by someone who needs the approval of the room to feel secure. God has been training you in the wilderness of not. Every rejection taught you to stop looking to people for validation. Every misunderstanding taught you to trust your own hearing of His voice. Every season of isolation taught you that His presence is enough, even when no one else is there. You have been learning to obey when obedience costs you relationships, to speak when speaking costs you reputation, to stand when standing costs you comfort. And now, whether you realize it or not, you carry an authority that the crowd cannot give and cannot take away. This is what deep assignment looks like. Not loud, not celebrated, not surrounded by applause, just steady, unmovable, rooted in something the majority doesn't understand and cannot shake. So when you feel the ache of not belonging, recognize it as confirmation, not condemnation. When you notice the distance between you and the people who seem so at ease, understand that the distance is intentional. When you wonder why you can't just be normal, remember that normal wasn't your calling. Depth was, clarity was, courage was. The world doesn't need more people who fit in. It needs people who are willing to stand apart, when standing apart is what truth requires. It needs people who have been so thoroughly stripped of the need for human approval that they can speak, live, and love with a freedom the crowd will never know. You are one of those people, and your not belonging is not your failure. It's your formation. You were never meant to fit in. You were meant to stand. And the fact that it has cost you so much is not evidence that you're doing it wrong. It's evidence that you're doing it right. Carry the assignment, walk the path, trust the process, and know that the God who called you into the margins is the same God who meets you there every single time, without fail.